Welcome to the Big Picture Film Club. Our guest today is the director of the gripping newsroom documentary While We Watched. Vinay Shukla, welcome to the Big Picture Film Club. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay. Um, I just wanted to start with, it's a very gripping documentary, and Ravish Kumar is a very interesting character. And I just wanted to start, like, why was now the right time for this documentary for you?
Um, I, the film is a very, very intense sort of newsroom thriller, and I was. Let me tell you how I started the project. I came across Ravish on television, and he was doing a 9 p.m. broadcast every day. Unlike most news anchors, especially in India, who hold these panel shows which are very Fox News style, wherein there's one panelist screaming at another panelist, and everybody's trying to win the argument, so as to say. Ravish's news broadcast was the complete opposite of that. He was doing these solid monologues of just speaking for 40 minutes with absolutely nobody else. And while most other news anchors were telling their audiences that the audience is number one, we are here to serve the audience, Ravish was actually scolding his audience and telling them to stop watching the news altogether. So I found that to be, it was curious. There was an irony in it, and at the same time, I really thought that here was somebody who was being very vulnerable on TV. Who was openly saying that things like, oh, the establishment calls me a zero TRP anchor, so I'm guessing nobody's watching my shows, but I'm going to say this any which ways. Uh, and I came across him at a time when I myself was wondering. I had cut myself off from the news. I wasn't watching the news anymore. Uh, and I would talk to my friends, and they would say that they have stopped watching the news anymore simply because they would say that it's not good for our mental health. Uh, so I had begun to feel that if all of us, or if so many of us are not watching the news, then there's something that's not right, because news is a system of public information. I believe, at least in India, all of us go to the news to learn something that will make our lives better. And if we are giving up on news, then it's probably not a good sign. So I wanted to make something around the news. I came across Ravish, who seemed like a good protagonist. And I began to wonder if the anxiety that I feel while watching the news, do the people who create the news or who make the news feel the same anxiety and the
Mm.
same uh, what is it that they are going through. So I started with that sort of introspection. Of course, now when the film is coming out, it's resonating a lot with audiences across the world, because journalists and journalism are going through very similar challenges,
Yeah.
across the world, wherein the people themselves are turning against journalists, and it's concerning, but I think we have to address it and build a dialogue forward.
And in sort of touring the film, and it's got a great reception across the world, like what are the sort of similarities you recognize in the sort of fractured news and media landscape, and what are things that are perhaps particular to India's sort of political climate?
Like I said, something that's very, very a current theme that's running across the world is that journalists themselves are being told to prioritize their country's interest, above that of journalistic search. So nationalism is a very, very trumping factor. Uh, if you see with what happened, with the Capitol Hill attack, with the Capitol Hill, what do you say? I don't even know what's the right thing to call it. Insurrection, or
Insurrection, yeah.
you know, uh, and what the people there were believing, that that these elections are unfair and the media is not doing the right job. But the media not doing their job correctly is a running theme across the countries. And of course, there have been several bad agents and lapses on part of the news industry. It's also true that there is a massive disinformation campaign that's running across countries against our journalists and journalism.
Hmm.
Uh, Something that's specific, especially in India, I can tell you, is that we currently lack institutional safeguards to build a better journalism. Our regulations, uh, within news organizations, outside news organizations, are not very good, and they haven't been good for many decades.
Hmm.
So where we are in India right now has been a steady downwards spiral, which has been accelerated in the last couple of years. But I keep telling people, and I keep talking to people and telling
Hmm.
them, that, for example, this film is a very emotional story of a journalist who's trying to figure it out in a landscape around him, which seems like quicksand.
Yeah.
you know his newsroom is dissolving. He himself is wondering if he's relevant to his audiences. Ravish is a In the film starts, he's a tired protagonist, in that he's somebody who's done this job for 25 years or more, and then you suddenly begin to wonder one day if your audiences even cares about what you have to say. And as artists, that's the most frightening place for most artists to be, is to get ready with your art, uh, uh, be good at it, but then be told that the audience doesn't care about you anymore and your sensibilities are now outdated.
Yeah.
So this film is about that sort of that challenge, that loneliness that comes with adulthood. I say very often this film is also about adult loneliness. It's about the loneliness that people in their 40s and 50s have to live through, uh,
Hmm.
because of the decisions that they made in their 20s.
Yeah.
Enduring life choices, and really having to sort of figure it out. Uh, so my ambition with this film was to really almost bring sensitivity towards journalists back into the conversation. I think we have become desensitized to journalists and their challenges and their struggles. And if you're looking to build, a better future, journalism is at the absolute bedrock of that future.
Yeah.
And we cannot build a better journalism without talking to our journalists, without taking care of our journalists, and without building a better institution for and around them.
And sort of keeping the focus on Ravish for a moment. Um, Throughout the documentary, I find him to be a remarkably resilient person, a very principled person, almost to his own detriment at times. How did he come across to you? How did you experience him, and how did your relationship sort of evolve throughout the time that you're filming?
I mean, so when I started shooting with Ravish, I had some idea. He's very popular in India. He's a Hindi language journalist. So his fan base, or his people who follow him, uh, the numbers easily outstrip any English language journalist in India. Uh, but I was also ignorant towards just the depth of his following, because I'm an English speaking person, and very often the English speaking are only worried about the English speaking. So I was guilty of not understanding his body of work and his reach as well as I should have. Uh, Ravish is interesting in that he is, of course, he has the qualities that you mentioned, but beneath all of that, he's really just a very, very, very curious guy. The film focuses on a lot of his political reportage, because that's the story I wanted to tell, of our times. But you can go and check out his broadcast, and he's done shows around poetry and authors and the origin of the idea of India, sort of these sort of philosophical debates about our own evolution, our own culture, our own future. So he's driven by a fair amount of curiosity, a fair amount of fun. I know the film that you've just seen has been a very, very intense watch. Uh, but I should tell you, I am guilty of that. Ravish is actually a
Okay.
fun person.
Cool.
Ravish is actually, it's a whole lot of, it's pretty chill to be around him. There's plenty of jokes. The film didn't have any of that. I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
But he's also driven just by the desire to build a more inclusive future for everybody. I don't think he gets it right all the time. I think he struggles. I think I struggle. I think a lot of us struggle. But it's undeniable that he's trying. And I think there is the people who are interested in listening to him see that in him, see his desire to build something better for all of us. They see him struggling, and I think there is some beauty in sort of sticking it out with people who are struggling, which is what this film is about.
And I suppose finally, looking forward, how do you envision the news media landscape, particularly within India, evolving in the near future?
I think the mainstream news, the television news in India for sure, is headed for a difficult time. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, just because the kind of uh, dialogue and conversation you need for that is currently it's not happening at the scale that it should. My film is an ambitious project to bring that conversation to the forefront, and I am hoping that the conversation will this film will help mainstream the conversation around just how much course correction our journalists and our journalism need to do. But it's looking difficult. At the same time, I think there's a new kind of media, there's a new kind of journalism that's evolving from the guerrilla organizations that are existing in our country today, especially online, on YouTube and other places. And I think they are the ones who are going to shape and change the future of the Indian news media. So if you really want to understand what's happening and who is doing a great job, then you should log on to YouTube and check out the journalists who are functioning in that space, not TV news, for sure. Also, just to sort of give you one more sort of takeaway right now, there is a fair amount there. For example, in the US right now, the writers are right now on strike against artificial intelligence and Chat GPT, because they have been told that we don't need you anymore, and Chat GPT is going to write exactly in your style. So bye bye. I can tell you that in the next year or two and three, the biggest frontier wherein AI is going to wreak havoc is journalism, and it's coming at us at an unprecedented scale. So unless we understand the challenges that we are up against and we try and build a better journalism, we have some very, very difficult years ahead of us. In fact, I mean, we are right now hurtling towards it at breakneck speed. So I would urge everybody to be a part of the conversation and I don't know, feel something. I don't know if you want to do something, but feel something for sure.
Vinay Shukla, thank you very much for sharing your film with us. sharing your words with us, and we look forward to seeing where you go next. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.